Yeah, so how's it going, man? Happy New Year.
Likewise. Wait, did we have we not talked in the new year? Oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, we haven't recorded yet. I don't
Yeah,
think.
I think the last
Was
one we did was.
Ian? I can't remember.
It's hard for me to
Um,
remember too now that you say it, but
yeah,
yeah, I think Ian was the last one of
was
last year. Yeah, he was before the New Year.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Um, yeah. I think like Happy New Year, the opportunity to say Happy New Year expires on like January 3rd, but
Yeah,
people insist on like really like breaking it out through deep January.
yeah, I've definitely said it to people like almost like January 31st before. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Uh Yeah, so all's well, man. How are you?
good, good. Just enjoying all the hype about the ETF. Uh, I don't know if you placed any trades with your broker. But it's at least we have that coveted legitimacy for Bitcoin, even though most of us
Uh,
hardcore people don't feel that the need necessarily for the ETF. It brings legitimacy to the space, I think.
I'm more in the pro camp than the anti camp, I think.
Mm.
I I think yeah, the legitimacy is cool. I think I've always said this, right? But whatever brings market entrance in, I think is ultimately probably a good thing.
Yeah,
Because then people will, some of them at least will get excited about Bitcoin or learn about it or, look for alternative ways to have exposure. And some of those people will land on self custody, and they might not have otherwise. And
yeah,
so, therein lies a good. I feel the same way about altcoins. Um, and I'm in the cohort that, uses one of the financial institutions that decided that we're not allowed to buy these shares.
mm,
Um, and so I think, people commented about it on Twitter a lot yesterday. And I thought that was really surprising. SEC approved, live trading, right? But like this
yep,
asset manager that, I have investments with was like, nope, not even, there's not even like a way to like override it or anything. They're just like, you can't buy these. That's causing me to think about switching asset managers. But I was pretty surprised by that. I don't know what you think about that.
well, I think you can probably also give it time. Yeah, I don't have any positions in Bitcoin related products and US based brokerages, but um, if I do get there, yeah, for retirement account purposes or whatever, I believe my brokers will be fine. I'm not in one of those stubborn, hard nosed, old school brokers or whatever. But yeah, I think it's. I actually had a couple interesting things, or at least interesting things I was remembering. And for me, it's all going to be about like the precious metals ETFs. That's something I'm definitely going to try to track, because just big picture. I mean, I've talked about this for years anyway with the monetary based stuff. But if you can also look at gold and silver ounces as far as like what is transparently traded, and that being primarily ETFs, and it's about 100 billion. Like round numbers, it's 100 billion. So it's already smaller than the Bitcoin market cap itself. Um, I think
You mean in
the
volume, like trading volume?
no in NAV, in net asset value, it's 100 billion dollars worth. That is not a lot.
Oh, I thought the gold ETF was like a trillion, like multi-trillion dollar
It's
product.
about it's about 60 billion, my friend.
Do,
Uh,
do you buy the comparison? Like everyone loves throwing up the gold ETF chart.
uh,
Um,
I did.
is
I
that
actually
a
didn't see
valid
any.
comparison?
I didn't see any charts of that. But no, just for your information, assets under management of GLD, the biggest one, the Spider Gold, it's 56
Yeah.
billion, and it goes down like way down from there. So 100 billion is probably generous. I will get some good charts of this in the future. Um, and Bitcoin still has a lot of room to grow there because I think what the BITO, which was the futures ETF that was active for a couple of years already, that has like 2 billion, right? So that was probably the biggest futures ETF, I think.
Mm.
And so obviously we got a lot of room to grow. So I think you look at those numbers for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I don't think it's going to be as bombastic as most people think. I think that it will definitely gain plenty of enthusiasm from investors, younger investors as well, like young professionals for sure, and maybe some boomers as well. But I just think it's just fully generational, um, and I don't know. I don't necessarily think the ETF like craze is going to, kind of like you said, like it's 50-50. Like, is it really going to hurt Bitcoin or really going to help? I'm more in the pro camp. Definitely agree with you there. But I think that for many much better reasons, basically most people that want to be in it are in it. And if you're young and driven, you going to want to understand the technology anyway to take custody yourself or use multi-sig or whatever. So all those things I think are still much more in the camp of like Bitcoin being outside of an ETF. But even if you were in an ETF, this is an interesting parallel. I remember we interviewed Brian Kelly during the boom of
Hmm.
2017 from CNBC. I actually don't even know if he's still there. I don't know if you know. He probably
I don't
is.
know either.
Their crypto guy, basically.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I asked him specifically. I'm like, how how valuable of a ETF from like a gold bug principled stance is something like the GLD or the SLV? Like, are you really, if an investor and you really are worried about if the gold is there, because this is what it comes down to, with this custody stuff. Like, are you actually going to be able to go down to the, one of the New York exchanges or somewhere in the COMEX to actually withdraw, and take delivery of your gold if you really want to? And do you think any investors in the GLD or SLV could actually do that? And his answer was basically no, it's not going to happen that way. I mean, he gave a little bit more longer answer, but yeah, I have a very difficult time believing that any investors would actually want to do that. And that's like the whole thing with Bitcoin. It's just the beauty of Bitcoin is it's so much easier to take possession, right? I mean, with gold,
Hmm.
you could have 3 to 7% uh, uh, trading fee. That's like literally the fee that versus spot, basically, that your uh, broker and or like a place like Gold Money, Peter Schiff's favorite company, who he's invested in, like real hardcore principled gold companies. They're going to charge you at least 3% on the fee there. And if you really want to take delivery, it's way more expensive than that. For the shipping and everything else. So the whole process, bottom line, as much as the gold silver bugs love that idea, is very difficult, and there's just not that much of a market for it. And I don't think there's even a much of a market for people that kind of like gold and want the exposure, a la the ETFs, right? As I just said, that's less than 100 billion worldwide. So yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying I don't necessarily think it's going to be any different than Bitcoin in this case. Like the people that buy the Bitcoin ETF, although we saw a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners like excited about it. I mean, some are not, as we just said. There's people that are I think it's a con more than a pro. But I just think in general, it's going to be a very similar clientele. It's going to be people that yeah, maybe young professionals have some cash to spare, want some Bitcoin price exposure, don't want to deal with the hassle. But I have a hard time seeing that this is going to be, the camel's nose under the tent or whatever, where Bitcoin gets taken over or it's too dangerous or this and that. I just don't think people will be that interested, because you don't have to be that interested, to buy it. That still could be wrong, you know, but that's generally what I think. If Bitcoin does disprove that thesis and it becomes way more valuable in terms of assets under management than the GLD or the SLV, I'm curious what that number is, but I don't think it's even trillions. I just don't think so. When
Hmm.
gold and silver are 100 billion, I mean, how high can that number really go for a regulated structured product?
Um, yeah, I don't know. What did the Bitcoin market cap peak out at last time? It got to a
Trillion,
trillion, right?
trillion,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So yeah, one of the charts, I can't find the one that I saw like 10 times on Twitter yesterday, but
Mm,
the one I'm looking at here says from from the gold spot ETF approval in November 2003 to its peak, which took a little while, was a 425% rise, right? So that's what people like to compare uh, for Bitcoin, right?
Is
Like,
that the is that the GLD?
was that the first one? This chart
Probably.
doesn't.
It's probably the
Yeah, this was
spider.
1974. Um,
Can you share that one?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Uh, charts on this one.
yeah. It should
So
be. The
that's the
chart's in that
gold.
article.
That's the gold price. Yeah, that's not a very helpful article as far as like being descriptive, but yeah, the spider one started at this time, November. So it's the
That's the
GLD,
spider one.
but that's
Yeah.
just the price. That's just the price chart of gold. And it came at a very convenient time. I mean, gold was in a 20-year bull when that's, or excuse me, a 20-year bear when that's, ETF started.
Mm.
Um, I don't know how much credence I would give to that analysis. So like just the fact that the ETF started that way and that's where it went because there was more and that's kind of my point as well. There were more market dynamics, I think, behind gold's price rise, even you know, uh, despite the presence of an ETF, because I think it's a good chart to look at, like as far as getting these assets under management on a chart. And I'll try to get it together soon, but it's just not as much as people think. If you think about all like the blustering that Peter Schiff has done over the last 10 years with Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin long ago passed all of the transparent gold and silver ounces above ground held by investors, a la ETFs, i.e. ETFs. Did you send another one?
So this is like the one that's been going around Twitter, although it's just one of several,
Yeah,
which basically compares the Bitcoin price chart, which there's some similarities. Although like I always feel like if you cherry pick your time frame and then zoom in and out, you can like make two charts look very similar. Um, but yeah,
exactly.
obviously like some similarities here. Although that is like generally what a blow off top and bear market looks like, so it's not that surprising that those two have a similar path. That's not a unique chart to either of those assets. Um, and then so yeah,
I don't
it
even
kind of does
think
look like
I don't even think this is correct though. I mean, this is like a chart of look at the peaks. Like that could be a chart of 2017
that's the 17. You're actually right. That is the 17.
because you don't see the double top of
The
21.
double. Uh-huh. Good point.
It's weird. Anyway, yeah,
So
anybody can make this
yeah,
stuff.
well, there you go. If you saw it on the internet, it doesn't mean it's true.
But no, it's a good one. And you mentioned as well, here's one we picked up from Ran, who was not so happy about the day because of all the redemptions from Grayscale, which is to be expected, as you mentioned.
But
But
why is that bad? I don't understand that.
no, I don't think so either. I mean, they've been locked up for years and years, and also
Yeah.
lots of you know court proceedings surrounding that whole saga.
But
So,
like it's just that's the free market acting, right? So just because
mhm.
someone doesn't like how the free market acted when the constraints were restrained or
Yeah,
were lifted,
yeah,
and Grayscale did a ton of volume, and like it wouldn't surprise me if some people redeemed that
yeah,
there was pent up demand for that. And day one, I don't think is really any indicator of
yeah.
where we're headed.
Absolutely. And Grayscale, just to remind our listeners, uh how much do they have? I should know that. I don't know it off
How
the top of
many
my head.
Bitcoin?
Yeah, off the top of my head. They're not listed on
Oh,
some of the apps I have
I
for
should
assets
know
under
this. Wasn't it
management.
600,000?
Uh could be, but let's just do the math roughly on that to see what is that. Is that 2? Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is
Yeah, six
600,000,
hundred and forty-three thousand.
right? So it's 2 roughly, 2.5 bill, right?
Is that what that works out to? No, it's more than that.
24. No.
It says, well, here on Google, it says that's 30 billion value
Yeah,
today.
24 bill. Sorry. My
It's 24.
brain's
Okay.
not working on Friday here. Yeah. So, yeah, 25, 30 billion would be their max holdings, which is big. That's obviously you're getting up to the numbers anyway. Back to the gold and silver, all gold and silver ETFs put together, not even 100 billion. So yeah, that's a huge amount of asset value. Not even talking volume here. I'm just talking asset value that could, has the possibility to, be redeemed. Of course, that's going to happen.
Yeah. I did I did really like two of the ticker names. Um, so someone got BRRR for money printer goes
Yeah,
where.
Burr,
I thought that
Valkyrie.
was Valkyrie got that. That was awesome. And then someone else got. I thought that was the best one. Someone else had HODL,
Yeah, Van Eck.
which
Both of
that nobody
them,
got that.
I think, are pretty principled people as far as not principled people, principled entities that have been around for a long time, and I hope that both of them actually get some. I think yeah, it's good. Both great names for both. I think good entities. Hopefully, they can be around for a long time. But yeah, it's interesting to
Well,
see how many there are to start and how long this could go. Because, like we said with gold and silver, again, it's massive Pareto distribution from the big to the small.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do we think all 11 of these are gonna survive, or it's gonna be more of like a consolidation of the top three or
It
four?
seems to be what happens, especially in these, you know, precious metals, asset backed holding type funds. Even with something like SPY, the S&P. I mean, that's like a massive fund which traders use all the time. Is my understanding. I mean, I'm not in the market, but I understand that. It's just like if you really want an active hedge to something at any point, like why not just use the SPY? So it's like why use anything else?
Yeah.
Um,
Um, well, like traders love liquidity.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch. With the market literally just opened. Uh, let's see. Yeah, grayscale trading down just slightly. Same with BlackRock. Um, but and this is not an original thought, but I agree with those that have been saying these big institutions do have sales teams, right? And the sales teams are probably dispassionate about Bitcoin, or at least some of them are, but they have a new
mm-hmm.
product and they're supposed to run around the country and the world selling it. Um, and so, previous to this, we've never really had, like, in my opinion, Bitcoin always just sold itself.
Yeah,
Um, it didn't have a sales team, right? Like you have companies out there that have products, but no one was like walking around trying to get you to just buy a Bitcoin.
yeah,
People did that because they wanted to. So this is a different, someone's going to get a cold call from, a junior analyst at BlackRock being like, hey, have you considered, the IBIT for your portfolio? That's new.
yeah. And everybody's gonna have to take a position regardless, or take a view, not necessarily a position as in buying something, but just like people take views on stocks versus bonds or whatever, gold versus uh, whatever some other asset class. It's definitely going to be around now, like it or not, regardless of what Vanguard says or something. So totally agree. You're going to have to take a view at some point.
What do you think of the consolidation of custody under, like, it's almost all of them are using Coinbase. Like Fidelity is doing self custody, and I think one or two others had
Yeah,
an alternate custody option. But of the 11, I think eight were Coinbase.
yeah.
Um,
I'd be worried if I were Jesse Powell. I mean, I don't know. He'd be someone I'd love to talk to on the show because it clearly seems that Coinbase is the anointed one. Like they're the one that's going to be allowed to come into the tent that is you know the hegemony, the behemoth that is the U.S. financial system headquartered in New York. Like Coinbase is going to be allowed to come in. Clearly,
mhm.
that's what's been happening. Someone like Jesse Powell, who's like a hardcore libertarian, and I still remember his hilarious tweets, like way back in the day when the NYDFS was trying to say the Kraken, wasn't filling out their surveys and stuff. He was like calling them like, just like the gross girlfriend that just never stops calling. I don't know, he's like, we don't even have clients in New York. Like, what are you, what are you guys doing? I just remember some of his tweets. I probably stated that wrong, but it was something like the ex girlfriend. I mean, Kraken has been like, they're a great company, and they have been just fined up the wazoo for, of course, doing nothing wrong as far as their customers are concerned. So I think this is gonna be very challenging for uh, certainly U.S. based exchanges that are not exactly like Coinbase. And I don't know, MicroStrategy. Uh, what they haven't been public about it, but I think everybody's pretty sure it's Fidelity, Coinbase, and one other
Mm.
that they use. So the consolidation is there again. But I'm curious. I'm curious how this, when it all settles down and the interest, the interest in the asset settles down. I'm curious how. I think that number will eventually get bigger than the GLD and the SLV for sure. The precious, like the gold and silver, it's going to be bigger. Uh, how much bigger will be very interesting to see. But I have a hard time thinking that if Bitcoin gets back to a trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, that this is going to be some gigantic part of that. I don't think so. But I don't know. You have a different opinion?
Um, I'm probably a little more bullish than you are. And I think the reason being that so we've also reduced the account sign up barrier to entry,
Mm,
and people are lazy, right? And so as of yesterday, everyone, I mean, let's say like some of these asset managers acquiesce and start allowing purchases but there are others that certainly do allow purchases. So previously, like, if your kid came home from college and told, mom and dad they should buy Bitcoin, they have to help you, probably open a Coinbase account or, something else. And you got to go through the verification process and, hold your sign up and do all of that. Now, like, you just open up your Fidelity account and you can buy it.
yeah.
And so uh, friction and barriers to entry, reduce access. Um, and I think we've eliminated some of that here. And so human nature being what it is, it's now easier to buy Bitcoin. And I think I think that's going to be a material impact on activity. I
Yeah.
really do.
No, I get it. I get it. I'm definitely looking forward to just tracking this and seeing how it grows because, like I said, big round numbers. That's 100 billion only for precious metals, and I would love the head fake of like all of Wall Street to be like, okay, well, our customers actually want to hold Bitcoin for these various reasons, even though they're not holding it the way we would say is the way to hold it. Um, yeah, all the reasons that you said are totally, I think, legitimate, and it's also would be interesting to see how they grow in other markets. Um, that are not necessarily the U.S.
Mm,
I think Sweden was like the first ETF ever
yeah.
listed, and I haven't tracked that one. Let's see how big that one ever got.
It looked like you had some other charts, though.
I
What
have
kind of
some.
economics are you bringing to the table?
It's not exactly economics, but just fun. This one I did a daily on. If you look at from the start, basically the start of pricing Bitcoin Pizza Day, we can start to gather some data of price till January 9th, which was uh, the old anniversary of Satoshi releasing the code. Also, the anniversary of this podcast, Alec,
I know.
January 9th.
I know.
Because it was
So
just too
it's
pretentious
steeped
to
in meaning.
it was too pretentious to do January 3rd, so I figured I better do January 9th. Uh, it's the day that Satoshi released the code.
Very
Anyway,
thoughtful.
yeah, exactly. So obviously, this is the trend everybody knows from the dollar. This is just inverted, basically dollar pricing, but you can look at it as far as 100,000 local currency units, how much you could buy at any time. So at the beginning, let's just quickly do this, like to look at the dollar. Uh, you could basically buy the network at the beginning. Uh, you actually get more than 21 million Bitcoin, but that's just illustration purposes only. Obviously, there's no liquidity.
Hmm.
It's the price that Laszlo sold 10,000 Bitcoins for two pizzas. would have been more than 21 million. I think there was only about 3 million at the time anyway in 2010. So it's for illustration purposes. But anyway, you get to sort of understandable numbers already by like mid 2011. You get like maybe 5, 6,000, 7,000 Bitcoins, depending on the day, maybe even 10,000 um, with $100,000. $100,000. But then, of course, it just goes down from there. So it's just the inverse of the price we all know to where today, 2.27 BTC. That was January 5th number. So that's how much you could get in Bitcoin with $100,000. So not to go through every one again, which I did in this video, people can check it out. But the pound sterling, that's the strongest currency. It's a little bit more, 2.88. Swiss franc, it's about the same. Euro, it's about the same. But if you look at some currencies that are obviously prone to inflation, the Turkish lira, you can see that's quite a big difference. So whereas you could still basically buy the network at the beginning, maybe 15 million Bitcoin as opposed to the 20 million or so that the theoretical at that price, fell way down, especially in the last couple of years, to where you could get with 100,000 Turkish lira, you could get 0.08 Bitcoin. Argentine peso is another one, even worse. So again, at the beginning, roughly, many millions of Bitcoins with 100,000 Argentine pesos back in the day, but because of the massive inflation they've had, and this is even the official rate. This is not the black market rate we talked about. It rounds to 0.00.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's even worse if you do the black market rate, but this is the official rate. Even with Malay's devaluation to 800, 0.00 pesos. So then the real is a little bit in between. Chinese yuan, Indian rupee, it's a little bit lower, and the Russian ruble is about at India. So it's just an interesting way of looking at least I think, interesting way to show how literally 100,000 units of any currency could basically get close to buying the network 15 years ago. And now, at best, you can hope for, 2 and some change BTC.
Yeah,
So,
that's wild.
yeah, it's just funny. Like, if you think about this chart and you think about all the talking heads, all the brilliant people that are even now talking about where they think they know Bitcoin's going to go with this ETF and everything, and you just look at the long-term trend, you're like, it's interesting to think about. Like, you remember Peter Zeihan was on Joe Rogan about a year ago, and BTC was in a big slump because of the FTX debacle and everything. It was even under 20 grand a year ago. And he was so confident, like he is with everything about geopolitics. He was just so confident that he was saying, it's like Bitcoin is 16, 17,000, and that's 18,000 above its net value and all this stuff. And he's just so confident the way that he would speak. And it's just interesting to follow a system, as long as we have, and to see someone who, that they're not an expert on the system, but they're so confident that they know that where the market is, and they don't see any utility for this thing. I just think it's interesting to see over all the years. And there's still no shortage of people that think they know what the intrinsic value of Bitcoin is.
Yeah, he's I think confident is a great word to describe him because he's really a great communicator.
He
And
is.
so you hear, like, I've listened to him many times, and I hear him say things, and he's just like very convincing. And he is right. Something like he's been very accurate, I think, on uh, the Chinese economy and the Chinese population, like in decline, and municipal debt, and like he was calling that quite a while ago,
Yeah.
um, well before there were any indications of that data coming out of China for sure. Um, and so, yeah, but he always like he answers every question with like some certainty about the future for sure.
Yeah. He's probably a spook.
You say that about everyone.
No,
I don't think so.
it's funny
Actually,
that
he's a great mouthpiece for like American exceptionalism because all
sure,
of his
sure.
stories are like everyone's like, yeah, they're don't worry about that. They're gonna fade away in 20 years too. You know, um,
Yeah, he's very confident. But he always says
yeah,
these things about like what the CIA knows or doesn't know. Like I'm sure you've heard his line that Xi has no idea what's actually happening in the world because people die who give him information he doesn't like to hear, which is common with dictators. The same with Putin. Um, and so the net of that is everybody gives him information that he only wants to hear. And he's completely isolated himself. And the CIA. He said this. He Peter Zeihan has said this. Like the CIA, we knew exactly where and when Putin was when he was in his bunker. We told him that, but we don't know always what is happening with Xi because he's so isolated and insulated, and basically there's no
yeah.
capacity to spy on him apparently as well as the U.S. typically does. That was his sort of conclusion about Xi, which I thought was interesting. Did you gather that?
Maybe I've heard him say that. I mean, it's just hard to collect data at all out of China that they don't want you to collect.
Yeah,
So, that it seems logical that they could protect information around, the principle.
yeah,
That description makes him sound a little more like Kim Jong Un, and I think he probably has, a little more global awareness. Although, like, I don't know right now if I was offered either a job as a Russian general or a Chinese general, I might pick Russian, right? It's been terrible to be a Chinese general recently.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know which country is,
It's
you
it's
know,
it's not much better to be a Russian one, but yeah, I take your point. I take your point there.
yeah. Well, at least the Russian generals like know it's clear what failure and success is for them.
Yeah.
It seems like the Chinese generals are like, oh, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed yesterday, so you're going into timeout for 60 days,
Yep.
and you're probably going to be dead when you come
Or
out of timeout.
or worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you had anything more there, but that's an
No, I don't think
interesting
so.
tangent on him as well. He does write some interesting stuff. I certainly agree with that. But
It puts out a
the
lot of content consistently too.
yeah the the big point is like even if he is so educated on the world and geopolitics, I'm pretty sure he didn't see this coming with Bitcoin. And those of us that have been following this for a long time, though we couldn't have predicted all the ups and downs exactly for sure. The trend is obviously there. We've done, plenty of videos on the trend lines and stuff. And it's just always interesting to see these people that come in and sort of claim they know the intrinsic value. And I think that's only going to increase now with the ETF. And
Mm.
I'm glad that we have it. I'm glad that we have it legitimacy for sure. I can't tell you how many Wall Street people I've spoken with over the years, like when I've been in New York, and they just tell me Bitcoin's going to zero. It's going to zero. You don't even know what you're doing. What is this?
Hmm.
It's so interesting to be on that side of something like, have you even read anything about it? Do you understand how the protocol works? Do you understand, how you validate a block? Do you understand the consensus rules? And these people just have no idea about those things. So
Oh yeah, I still think there's probably a lot of that. Although it's better.
yeah,
It's better for sure. The I was we were talking about before the show, but it was 20. I'm pretty sure it was 2017, and I wanted to buy some GBTC shares at the
mm,
time. And in order to do that, and I'd never encountered this with any other like stock or asset purchase through my asset manager.
yeah,
I had to call them and they had to speak to me. And it was almost like a mental wellness check. They're like, does this person sound crazy?
yeah,
And they're like, you just confirm you actually want to buy these shares. And I'm like, yeah. And so that was required in order to purchase them. And so like, it just kind of shows you the disdain, my money, right? And they'll let you buy like, penny stocks, they'll let you buy like any sort of like crap, right? But this for some reason was so dangerous that they had to talk to me.
yeah. And that is one of the firms I think still that you mentioned. We don't have to say the name, but that's one of the ones that is not so favorable right now.
Yeah,
So we'll see.
yeah.
We'll see how that continues. But sorry, my baby's in the background being
I, I hear that. It's already too much information on the internet about your children. Someone's gonna like audio sample and do like a deep fake voice recording.
Man, you get me all paranoid about this stuff. Speaking of being paranoid about these things, let's look at this privacy review here on
Oh
cars.
yeah,
You sent me
cars.
this. Uh, Great work that the Mozilla Foundation does here, but basically they reviewed 25 car brands.
Yeah, it's not good. And we were talking about this, right? Like there is there is no car that you can buy that is not a data collection machine. Um, and unlike phones, so cars are like cell phones with wheels, right? They have a lot of the same data collection around location and usage and metadata. Cars have telemetry, right? There's updates, right? There's all sorts of stuff that a car has that is, and Tesla in particular is basically a phone with wheels. Like it even like feels like a phone inside of it. But the problem is phones are somewhat configurable, right? And so, like, even in an iOS phone, an Apple device, they put like guardrails around how much you can configure it, but you can go in and adjust things. Like you can turn off location services. You can tailor that device a little bit. On an Android, especially like if you're running like Graphene or something, you can tailor it, almost entirely to your liking. What this article points out is that cars either do not have those options, or they actually show us a section from Tesla's privacy policy where it says, if you no longer wish for us to collect vehicle data or any other data from your Tesla vehicle, blah 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 blah. This may result in your vehicle suffering from reduced functionality, serious damage, or inoperability. Right. So if we can't collect your data, your car is not going to work. Um, and I remember something similar the last time I bought a car, which was 3 years ago, maybe something like that, when I was purchasing, and I waited till right at like deal signing, like everyone's pregnant with this sale. I was like, hey, the one thing I just want to make sure is you can point out to me where to turn off the location services in the car. And the salesperson didn't know. No one's ever asked that question. So they brought up like someone from the mechanic side and they're like, oh yeah, you can't, like, it won't work if you turn it off. Right? Basically exactly the same thing Tesla said. This is not a Tesla. Uh, and it's just like not an option, right? So
Did you
if you
get
want a
it? Did
modern,
you investigate further
yeah,
or?
no, I just bought the car like a rube, right? Like because I needed a car. So what was I going to do? Like the
Yeah.
alternative would be to go buy a car from the 90s, right? Like we can do that. But I don't even know how far back you'd have to go, but I would think like at least 20 years, right? Um,
Or we just have to
you'd
wait
have
till
to,
Apple comes out with one and still allows us that little opt out for location services. Although, do we
sure.
really
Well,
know that
yeah.
they're opting us out? That's a whole other thing. Wasn't Amazon for a while like saying we're not collecting your Alexa voice, but we actually did? There was a whole,
Yeah,
I think there was a
I
whole
don't believe
lawsuit
in
there.
any opt out is really real. Or that's like I still think Apple knows where their devices are at all times. Um, and or they have some kind of information on it. Maybe, maybe not. But there was something else that was really interesting in here about Hyundai. Um, so Hyundai, what did they say? Yeah. Okay. So Hyundai's policy, and this goes to law enforcement requests. So like many companies have a system for receiving and reviewing law enforcement requests. So like Facebook and all the tech companies have it, and so a local police department wants information about a Facebook account, they will go submit to Facebook's like law enforcement request portal, and sometimes they allow it. Sometimes they say a subpoena is needed, right? Like there's a whole process for all of them. But Hyundai's policy is they will comply with lawful requests, whether formal or informal, right? So that just means a lot, some law enforcement entity has an informal request about, probably your car's location information, and they're going to honor that. So, I think that to me is probably a little more egregious than anything else I saw in here. The other thing that's an issue here, and this is also true of phones. So let's say your car is in the vicinity of a crime, usually what that means is when some of these law enforcement requests go in, the same with your phone, right? Your device gets captured in the dragnet of data around that crime that the law enforcement wants because they want to know who's in the vicinity, right? So who potentially could have perpetrated that crime. And in my opinion, that's overly broad, right? So I happen to be walking through a park at the same time as a crime was committed, and so therefore, like my device has to be captured in that. That's not the way sort of terrestrial law enforcement would work, right? Or at a minimum, it would require consenting by interviewing everyone in the park. And so in this case, they're not saying, hey, we have to go up and interview everyone in the park. They're saying, whether it's your phone in the park or your car in a parking lot, we're just going to capture all of that, and we'll decide who the criminal is here. Like, and I don't think that there's ill intentions there typically, but I do think that's an overcollection, and it's only an overcollection because it's available, and it's available because these car companies are collecting it.
And it's without
So
any subpoena. I mean, that's been known for years, right? I mean, they can just
yeah,
get it.
I don't know every jurisdiction, right? But in
Yeah.
general, yeah,
In
they can
general.
get that. Yeah, and even with phones, right? Like phone data is so granular that they know like the height of the phone at the time of the collection. So not only just like the location, but like how high or low it was. So if it was an apartment building and you're looking for someone on the second floor and you're on the eighth floor, right, that level of information is available from cell phones,
Wow.
which is like crazy, right? Um, so yeah, but this is a kind of a sad story, right, in this article, which is
Yeah.
there is no new car, according to them, that is privacy preserving. Every single one they vetted, there were 25, all failed. Some were slightly worse than others, but none of them
Yeah.
passed.
And it's one of these things, like even with Apple, just using the hypothetical example of Apple, presuming that Apple did make a car. I know it was rumored for years. I haven't heard anything
I'm sure
recently,
they
but
will.
yeah, they probably will. Um, Presuming it still has Apple's pretty nice consumer friendly privacy enhancing tools. Uh, that's still just one company, you know, and I just can't see that that's something that would save us all when we do get to that you know, draconian sort of dystopian future, because there's still one company that's very capturable, no matter what, you know, they say. It's just one company, and uh, that's just the fact of the matter. So I don't know. I know we've sort of danced around this topic all the time. We talk about how the zero trust or using public key cryptography might eventually help this, and I think that it will. That has to be one of the ways, if we're going to get anything back, that we'll get it back that way. But um, I don't know what else to do otherwise, other than use your guys' services to protect yourself as best you can.
Yeah, I don't even know how we solve for this, but one thing that I hear all the time is, so some people are like, yeah, but whatever, right? Like all I do is drive my kids to school and go to the grocery store, so like I'm not that interesting.
Sure.
And what I would offer is, let's pretend like you are a law-abiding, tax-paying, uninteresting, viceless, person. Uh, does that not mean that, or it doesn't mean that you're never doing anything that wouldn't be interesting to someone else, maybe even for business competitive reasons, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's say you work at R&D in a company and you want to go interview at another company to potentially get a job, right? Do
Yeah.
you want someone to be able to figure out you drove over there and took an interview,
Yeah.
right? Like that type of information, you're not doing anything wrong. Or like more in the like kind of like gray area. Let's say that same law-abiding, tax-paying citizen uh, has an affair, right? Not illegal. That's their thing, right? But that type of information could be uh, derived from geolocational information that comes from your phone or your car. All of a sudden, like you're co-locating with someone that you don't normally co-locate with, and then used against you, right? And would that surprise us in the political world? Not at all. Or if you just want to have a private life, right, which everyone I believe is entitled to,
Yeah.
what's going on here is it's just the it's just the appearance of privacy. Like if I hop in my car and want to go on a drive down a country road, right? Not really, right? Like that's you you, me, and like everyone at the car company and everyone at Apple and everyone at Verizon all know that I did that too.
Yeah. Well, we should be fair. Not everyone, right? But whoever has access to the
Sure.
encrypted backups, and if they wanted to misbehave, for sure.
Sure. And everyone who like needs to get that data for, user experience enhancements, right? Or whatever
Yeah.
the euphemism is.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you
that's
have any idea how tight those controls are? I'm sure they're varied. But have you heard? And I know that there's obviously bad stories, but is there a company that generally, like a phone company or anything, that does good practices as far as you know, or is it better to just not think about that?
I don't know. So I don't know enough to say. I know that the carriers in the US have very poor controls.
Yeah.
So like that would be
It's why
AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon.
you never want to use two factor. For those few people that haven't understood this by now, you never want to use your phone number as two factor. Never, ever, ever. Especially if it's some hot wallet on your phone.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, SMS two factor.
Yeah. The
Yeah, I would assume
SMS two factor. Sorry, if it wasn't
yeah,
clear.
yeah.
You never want to use
Uh,
SMS two factor.
I would assume there are some companies out there that are, rigorous um and authentic in their privacy controls. But I think anytime a company gets really big, they're looking at efficiency, right? And so, like who's out there scanning all the WhatsApp messages to make sure that, you're not violating WhatsApp's messaging policies? Like how do they do that? We know they outsource that. They don't do that with Facebook employees, or so, or WhatsApp employees, right? Like I think there's lots of room for error, and I think a lot of it is not ill intended. Let me just say that I do believe a lot of it's not ill intended, but the problem is that intentions are not a solve, right? Like
Yeah.
just because you didn't have bad intentions, it doesn't mean that the data's not there.
Yeah. And I mean, it can get serious, obviously. I mean, if you really want to take a stand, if you really want to do the right thing, uh, it's very easy to come after you. I mean, this, what's his name? It's Christoph Grozen, I think, from Bellingcat. He's like the Russia
Mm,
expert.
love those guys.
He's Bulgarian, I believe, but he's now in protective custody. It has been published, I guess, in the U.S. Um, because Europe has told him that they can't keep him safe, and he exposes so much about what Russia is doing in their war in Ukraine and just in general the madness that they do to their own people. Uh, that they obviously want to come after them, and that's Russia's number one thing is just taking revenge on people. It doesn't matter the jurisdiction. I mean, they can give you, radioactive sushi in London. It just does not matter. They will go after you. So obviously, it gets heavy if you really want to get into the political space, and that's a sad thing. So yeah, we're way far from anybody having uh, kind of like you said before, the real right to privacy and having it. And it doesn't seem like it's getting better, which I feel like I say every time to you. So it's always a depressing
Well, I
way to
agree.
it's always a depressing way to end the privacy discussion. But
Hey, Davos is next week though, so uh, should be some good privacy news coming out.
that's a great segue. I like it.
Yeah.
Uh, well, that's good, man. We don't have to go much longer. We can finish it on the old on another financial topic, the old federal debt for the United States. We've talked about this
Um,
before. But you know how Biden basically uh, tabled any debt ceiling until after his first term.
it's
Um,
just good politics.
exactly. So it's on the way up. When he came in, it was 23.2 trillion, and now 33.89 trillion.
It's quite a bit.
He came in January of 2020, right? Or was it January
Uh,
2021? How does it work?
January 21.
21. Okay, so it's higher. It's 27.7 trillion when he came in. So not as bad. But they've all increased
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Done videos
what's
on
a few
that.
trillion?
Yep. And that doesn't even include Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid in these numbers. It is interesting, though, that the Fed is not buying as much, or at least letting the treasuries that they have expire. This is part of their normalizing of their balance sheet, which they're slowly trying to do. So the peak was about 28% when
Mm,
Biden came in, and now they're down to 21% of government
mm,
debt is held by the Fed. But way jaggedy ever since the financial crisis, and all-time high
mm.
still, basically, except for the past couple of years. So yeah, maybe they'll solve that one at Davos as well.
Oh, they're on it for
They
sure.
probably they're ready to increase that at Davos for most countries. So
Um,
we'll see.
yeah, we'll do a whole. We should go do an episode from Davos.
I had a buddy, eclectic guy. He he went to Davos one year. He's a libertarian, good dude. In Europe here, he's with the Students for Liberty group, and he told me it was hilarious. There was like, I don't know if it still happens, but some years in the past couple of years, there was like a Bitcoin corner of Davos, and they were not connected to Davos. They just went because they, were like
Mm,
rich Bitcoiners from the day, and just
mm.
wanted to mess with people at Davos, and like they were holding parties.
Nice.
I don't know. I don't know how that all went down, but sounded like a pretty nice way, at least a little bit, to mess with the people there. And like they were really getting irritated. Like the security at Davos was just getting irritated at all these Bitcoiners that rented out this corner of the village.
I mean, being security at Davos is probably an annoying job anyway.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, if Larry Fink's there, then we have our Bitcoiner in the room, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Everyone's a Bitcoiner now that he's
so
there.
yeah, yeah, of
That's
course.
a good point, man. That is a good point. Well, that's probably it for me, Alec. Unless you have anything else for this week.
No, don't buy a car. Walk everywhere.
And don't buy the ETF.
Yeah, buy your own self custody. See how it feels.
Yeah, at least try a Trezor or something just for a little bit, and get your feet wet if you haven't already. Although I'm pretty sure that most people listening to this podcast have.
There's always someone.
Indeed. All right, my friend. Until next time, and Happy New Year,
Cheers.
January 12th.
Likewise.
All right.
And Happy New Year to you.
Thanks. Take care.